I will invite Professor Ben Boer and Elizabeth Maremma for the presentation of the outcome document. But before we do that, may I invite our colleague Yakuba Savadogo to come here, and the IUCN Councillor Mamadou Diallo, Achim Steiner. I would like to take this opportunity in the presence of our colleagues from Africa to thank UNEP for making sure that we could have, in an environmental law congress outside Africa, the largest delegation ever. So we have over 23 countries. And it's also a good opportunity, Elizabeth Maremma, who is our champion. Of course, we have several champions within UNEP, all infiltrated, and the Director General doesn't, the Executive Director doesn't know that they are infiltrated, but they are all over. So to thank all of you, but especially to use this opportunity to announce two important things. One is la Revue africaine des droits de l'environnement. It's already its second issue. And you can imagine how important and difficult to put together is an environmental law review. And I would like to congratulate Ibrahim Ali, Professor Ibrahim Ali from Senegal, and the members of the scientific committee, including Yakuba Savadogo. Yakuba, you do an extraordinary work in Africa, and I would like in public to recognize this. Of course, with the help of the whole family there, including the IUCN Council member, Mamadou, who happens to be a lawyer as well. So thank you very much, and I'll ask you to make the second announcement that is even more important.
Merci, bonsoir. Avant de faire l'annonce, je vais dire trois choses sur Antonio. Je dirais qu'Antonio, il est l'ami de l'Afrique. Pourquoi? Quand Antonio accédait à la présidence de la Commission des droits de l'environnement, l'Afrique n'avait que 47 membres. Alors, il m'a appelé, il a dit, Yakuba, il faut qu'il y ait plus d'Africains à la Commission des droits de l'environnement. Nous avons travaillé ensemble. Aujourd'hui, il y a une centaine d'Africains qui sont membres de la Commission grâce à Antonio. La deuxième chose, lorsqu'on préparait le colloque sur le droit de l'environnement en Afrique à Abidjan en 2013, il m'a dit qu'il faut que la Commission mondiale appuie cette organisation. Il s'est déplacé et on est allé ensemble à Abidjan en Côte d'Ivoire pour rencontrer les autorités ivoiriennes pour préparer le colloque, sensibiliser l'administration pour préparer le colloque. Ensuite, il m'a dit qu'il va venir au colloque à Abidjan. Il est effectivement venu, il a présenté une communication. Alors, la troisième chose est lorsqu'Antonio préparait ce colloque, il a dit qu'il faut que l'Afrique participe. Alors, il a contacté le PNUE, il m'a également contacté pour voir comment les Africains peuvent participer. Ensemble, nous avons travaillé et je pense qu'il y a 25 pays africains qui sont présents à ce colloque. Et pour cela, je vous demande de l'applaudir. Certainement qu'il a présenté l'ouvrage sur lequel nous travaillons depuis pratiquement 3 ans avec l'appui financier de la francophonie, qui est la revue africaine droit de l'environnement, dont lui-même il est membre du comité scientifique. Mais l'annonce la plus importante dont il parle est que nous préparons actuellement le colloque sur le droit de l'environnement en Afrique, qui aura lieu au Maroc, certainement à Marrakech, du 25 au 27 juillet 2016, donc dans quelques mois. Effectivement, par rapport à cette préparation, il y a beaucoup d'acteurs qui sont impliqués. Il y a le PNUE, il y a Antonio lui-même qui s'est largement impliqué. Et nous sommes actuellement sur le processus donc, de cette préparation. Il y a donc l'annonce qui a été publiée donc, sur la liste mailing de la Commission droit de l'environnement, sur beaucoup donc, de listes mailing et de sites, certainement que beaucoup sont au courant. Et nous vous invitons justement donc, à vous inscrire massivement pour prendre part donc, à ce colloque, qui est vraiment un événement capital avec la participation donc, du PNUE sur le droit de l'environnement en Afrique. Je vous remercie.
Merci bien, Yacouba, merci bien mes collègues. Et maintenant, on va continuer avec le programme et avec la déclaration de Rio. Merci bien. Thank you very much, Yacouba. Muito obrigado. We are now in Mamadou. So let's... When we speak about Africa and this large delegation that we have here, Steiner, there is somebody that is sitting right next to you. Achim, there is somebody that is sitting right next to you, Arnold Kreihuber, that I would like to thank in public, because he worked tirelessly. Of course, under very strict instructions from Elizabeth, and you know how Elizabeth is, we all follow, in order to make sure that we had this very large delegation of Africa here in our Congress. So Arnold, in public, thank you very much. With that, I would like to ask Elizabeth and Ben Bohr. Both of them have been so active in the organization of the many events that we have had. Ben has worked tirelessly, especially on this declaration. I think at the beginning, his idea was to have something short, but you know Ben, when he gets enthusiastic about writing something, collecting, he almost, as we say in Portuguese, entra em transe. So I had to somehow, ask for help in controlling him. And what we have now is a text that is very good, but both of them will present this collection of thoughts that were put together in a very democratic manner, but I would say with strong leadership from Ben and also Elizabeth. So I don't know who is going to speak first.
Thank you very much, Antonio. But thanks to all the distinguished delegates here, including many who are not with us here during this week. I'm saying so because they're now the product, the outcome of a few days' debates here have actually had the input of even those who are not present in this room today. The latest version with us now has been emailed to at least over 490 Environmental Law Commission members out there who have been continuously during the week providing their input as we continue our deliberations here. Before I say anything, permit me first to thank IUCN, the key brain behind this Congress, which is co-organized, co-convened with UNEP, but there are many other partners who have been engaged with us in this process. But here in Brazil, more so than many of us, particularly the Brazilian Association of Judges, the Supreme Court of the state of Rio de Janeiro, whom we are enjoying these facilities in the last few days, the Brazilian National Judicial School, the Association of Judges of the state of Rio de Janeiro, not forgetting, of course, this event we have been collaborating with the Organization of American States, the Asian Development Bank, the Globe Legislators International, INIS, and many others. And of course, with each one of you present here. We have spent the last 3 days discussing many issues related to environmental rule of law. But the cross-cutting theme we would have all realized has been what were we able to learn today as the result of the history where we are coming from. Environmental law, environmental rule of law did not begin today. It has evolved over history, and Hassan Pervez reminded us eloquently this morning, and of course the young generation, the career professionals, just reminded us a few minutes ago and took us through the history and how those emerging principles are relevant today as they were yesterday, and what then we all need to do in our own setting, our own jurisdiction, as the case may be, to carry further this message. The last few days, a lot of attention has been on discussing different principles of environmental rule of law, principles of environmental law. We have had many speakers elaborating on these different principles, and what came out clearly, there are those principles, one may say they've been there since the Rio Declaration, 1992, but we have also learned that, that these few days have been used to further, not just to elaborate, but to put some of these principles in a way which has never happened before. We have also discussed what one might say emerging new principles, which came up, and Ben Boyle will elaborate which are these principles, which actually marks our key outcome of the debate in this Congress. And it will be these principles which will dictate our way as we move forward. And we hope when we leave here at the end of today, tomorrow, we will really take these principles in our different settings. We have the legislators here. We hope we will see now also an evolution at the new national legislations related to environment, picking up some of these principles. We have many judges, Your Excellencies, honorable judges with us. We hope we'll also see this being picked up in your own judicial decisions, as the case may be related to environment. Of course, the 2030 agenda on sustainable development puts us or gives us a further benchmark on how these principles could be used to further contribute to the achievement of the goals which were just adopted last year. Issues related to the new climate change regime and how then these principles will contribute further into the implementation of the climate change, new climate change agreement, not forgetting all the environmental related instruments which already exist, for which then implementation and enforcement is still an issue. I think I will stop there and ask Brian probably if now can go into the principles which this Congress can be proud of. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Antonio, for your introduction. I would have to say, as an introduction as well, that whilst I might be difficult to control, there is another person beside me who I also need a great deal of assistance with in controlling the irrepressible energy and enthusiasm which enthuses all of us. So thank you. So one of the ideas behind this session was to do a report of the Congress as a whole, but as Elizabeth has indicated, many of the points that have come up within the Congress are now starting to be reflected in what Antonio calls the outcome document, which we are calling the World Declaration. The World Declaration probably is a little bit grand, but we are very ambitious, and I think we need to look ahead and take an expansive view of what we are doing. In a sense, the early career group friends that we heard just a few moments ago has summed up this Congress in a way much better than we can. And I pay tribute to the leaders of that group, both Michelle and Nick, and all of the other wonderful people that met the other day and excluded all of the older generation for at least a couple of hours. In any case, let me talk now a little bit about this declaration. It does reflect many of the points that were made both within the early career group as well as within various of the sessions that you have heard and been involved in. In the last few weeks we have shared this document on a daily basis, and it has grown like Topsy, and it now needs to be cut down a little bit perhaps. I do apologize for not being able to involve all of the 495 people who now have this document around the world, including hopefully all of you. It was sent out in a PDF just a couple of hours ago. But in any case, we have had a reasonable amount of input, both in the last few days as well as just in the last few minutes. In fact, I've had various judicial submissions from various continents and countries from the judges, and this is one of the rare occasions in which an academic is able to get a submission from a judge rather than the other way around. In any case, what we have tried to do is to rationalize sometimes conflicting inputs, sometimes conflicting ideas and concepts. What we have tried to do is to try to concretize some concepts into new principles. And I'm not going to go into detail here, nor am I at this point inviting discussion of these principles as such, but just to, and before I get to the principles and very briefly list them, just to indicate, as you will see on your email, that we have a fairly long introduction which recognizes all of the organizations involved in this Congress, and we hope that we have not missed anyone. We are basically trying to ensure that we build what we are now calling the environmental rule of law as a legal framework for environmental justice and global ecological integrity. And you'll see there's a great number of preambular paragraphs which set out all of the kinds of concerns that we have been talking about in the last few days, and indeed in the last 40 years. So let me just go to some of the aspects of this in terms of trying to recognize from a scientific point of view the planet and its boundaries, and realizing that we need to live within the capacity of the Earth, or of Earth, as Brendan Mackey would say it, and putting then the importance of the rule of law forward in the environmental area, or quite appropriately in the environmental sphere of the Earth, or of Earth. But let me now go to the principles themselves and just very briefly list them. One of the things which has been impressed upon us is really to firstly focus on nature. Respect for the rights of nature itself, which is of course something that comes very much from this continent, from the Latin American countries, and indeed from several of the constitutions, Ecuador and Bolivia, in terms of realizing that nature also has rights. Principle 2 is to do with living in harmony with nature, which has been the message for many years from various of the documents with which all of us should be familiar. But then also the right to nature, the human right to nature, the human right to wilderness, accepting it as a common heritage, accepting it as something that has its own inherent existent value, but also value for us. Then you'll see that we are working with the concept of in dubio pro natura and trying to think through an English term for that so that it's more than obvious what it means. But basically we've come up with the term giving nature priority. You'll see that there are various things in brackets that still need to be thought through, but this principle of in dubio pro natura linked with the precautionary principle I think is becoming something that is broadly more accepted. I'm just going to very briefly mention each of the principles because I know that we haven't got a lot of time. So principle 5, ecological sustainability and resilience, we need to think through just how this language will be taken by the judges, by the legislators and others, and therefore this, as I've said, is not necessarily the final document, and this is one principle that we need to think through more thoroughly. Principles 6 and 7 recognize intragenerational equity and justice, that is to say equity within this generation, and then also principle 7, intergenerational equity and justice. And we've put the words and justice here to really recognize what this Congress is about, justice for nature and justice for humanity. It was also impressed very strongly upon us that gender equity must be recognized as a principle, and we have used language which has been suggested by several of our participants in order to reflect that idea, that concept, and now that principle. One of the things that you may remark upon, and you should feel free to remark upon these issues on email particularly, is that there are certain principles here which reflect what we have already accepted, but what we have tried to do is to reformulate the principles that are already accepted and to add to them. So, for example, with the principle of participation, we mentioned specifically that these should be actively pursued on the one hand, and also to specifically include minority and vulnerable groups, as well as reflecting the perspectives across generations, listening particularly to the younger people as we have had today, to respect that, to think through the very youngest to the oldest people in our human communities. Principle 10 talks about indigenous and tribal peoples, and this of course reflects some of the 2007 provisions in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and I hope that we have done that justice. We may need more language there, and please feel free to expand or make comments in relation to this one. Principle 11, whilst the polluter pays principle has been with us for many years, what we have done here is to add some further language in order to particularize what we mean. It's not just paying for pollution in terms of a pollution license, but in fact to look at the whole gamut to look at the whole gamut of pollution in terms of pollution itself, pollution prevention, and then what happens later and who pays. So degradation, mitigation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reparation, and that it should be paid for by the parties responsible for the pollution and for the cleanup. So that's principle 11. There are another 6 to go, and I'm just going to very briefly mention them. So principle 12 is the principle of non-regression, which we've heard now a fair bit about, and last night we had a wonderful overview of that from Emile Chevalier. and this principle is now starting to be accepted in a number of jurisdictions, and it's something that we can pay tribute to Professor Michalek from the University of Limoges, who is not able to be with us, but as I said yesterday, is certainly with us in spirit. Principle 13 is a principle that we would like to put forward as a new principle, or at least a principle which recognizes the responsibility of states to continually review their environmental law and policy in order to ensure that the latest scientific and policy developments are taken into account. So on a regular basis, looking at the law and saying, well, we must review it, we must fix it, we must expand it and make it stronger. So this question of progression is, let's say, a progression from the principle of non-regression, from not backsliding to going forward is the point there. With principle 14, the debate was around the idea of corporate social responsibility. And some of us thought, well, maybe we should put the private and the state sectors together, given that the corporate sector is sometimes much more powerful than some states, but we need to place the responsibility on both parties or both entities equally. Principle 15 is one which may need more debate. And you'll see that here this is a focus on property and the legal obligations on property owners and carers of property, managers of property, to maintain essential ecological processes and the integrity of that land in terms of its nature, but also legal obligations to restore where that land or that water body has been disturbed or degraded. Principle 16 relates to good environmental governance, and this is a principle which really brings a lot of this together in terms of an obligation to ensure that legislation is adopted, that it's implemented, that it's complied with, and that it's enforced. And then finally, a broad principle of cooperation and coordination, looking across the disciplines, looking across the private and public sectors, looking transnationally between jurisdictions as well as subnationally between jurisdictions, and then incorporating these ideas into the implementation and planning processes that are required to achieve sustainability, or what some people would want to continue to call, and we call, sustainable development. So that, ladies and gentlemen, in very brief sum, is what the principles are at this point. And I will make some more remarks after Elizabeth has gone through the next part of this document, which is the means of implementation. Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Bern. Just as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with its SDG goal 17 means of implementation, equally as we need to ensure that the principles which Ben has just elaborated, 17 of them by coincidence, needs to be implemented for this Congress to have made a difference in the coming year or in the future, as we have discussed. And the Congress has been able to identify different means and areas which, if all we play our role in their implementation, hopefully we'll be able to reach a better world as far as environmental rule of law is concerned in the coming years. First, we looked at the question of the need to monitor and identify reporting mechanisms to ensure or to enable accurate assessment of the state of the environment and the pressure that the environment is in it. We need to ensure that there are legally supported environmental management systems which will be able to take due consideration of the environmental risks and vulnerability of socio-economic systems in the face of ecological deterioration. We need to also look at environmental assessments which are able to incorporate multidimensional perspective and complexities of social and economic relationships. We need to look at the quantitative and qualitative modeling and visioning tools which will enable planning based on strategies and options which are robust under the multiple plausible future. We'll need to look at ways and means to collaborate and be able to adapt to the management styles as well as governance modalities. Environmental legal education and capacity building had been underlined as key, looking at exchange of information, experiences, best practices, lessons learned, taking into account legal, political, socio-economic, cultural, and religious aspects, recognizing the common features founded on international norms and standards. Communication systems enabling the production and dissemination of guidelines, toolkits, checklists, technical and legal implementation assistance for states have all been discussed and underlined as important means also of implementation. We have met here in the last 3 days, and one thing we've done has been creating network among ourselves, among different bodies represented here, and therefore environmental law associations and non-state actors to fill the gap in the state-based system has been underlined as one of those key means of implementation. Harnessing new technologies and media for promoting environmental law education and access to information, and the young generation have reminded and showed us how those media and new technologies can do that. The issue of enabling public interest dispute resolution concerning environmental conservation and protection, upholding the rights to and of the nature have also been underlined as important aspects in that regard. Assuming we will succeed to take steps on these means of implementation and take action, we hope that then this Congress is ready to take the next steps. And these next steps have been underlined to include requesting all of you, each one of us, all interested parties here and out there, to increase and strengthen our cooperation to deliver on the environmental rule of law. We appeal to you, to us, as part of the international environmental law community to ensure coherence, knowledge sharing, and capacity development to embrace the environmental rule of law. We take this opportunity also to urge governments, international and regional organizations, donor agencies, civil society, the private sector, and all other stakeholders to contribute to building the environmental rule of law based on the principles already elaborated. And we hope we can agree that we'll come back after 4 years, 2020, to take stock of the actions each one of us would have taken on these principles and see if we were really on the right track to a better future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Just as a final word then, you'll have seen on email that I have requested that within a week, that is to say by the 6th of May, I would like to see any further comments or redraft suggestions being sent to us to incorporate into a document which hopefully then can be finalized. Secondly, obviously, we will need to translate the final declaration into the IUCN languages, the other IUCN languages, as well as into other languages as far as our financial or IUCN's financial capacity allows. And I will undertake in particular to ensure that it is translated into Chinese. In any case, I commend this draft declaration to you, and we look forward to your comments by email. Thank you very much.
Excellent work by Ben and Elizabeth. So I would like to thank both of them on behalf of everyone and all the institutions that are involved in the organization of this Congress. The next panel is the presentation of the title of Honorary Citizen of Rio de Janeiro and the Tiradentes Medal, the highest award bestowed by the state of Rio de Janeiro, to Achim Steiner. I would like to invite, first of all, Deputado, I'm sorry, I have just been, I lost my position as the Master of Ceremonies, so there is somebody better that will be doing this. Eu acabo de perder a minha posição de mestre de cerimônia. Há alguém mais qualificado para fazer tudo isso.
Senhoras e senhores, muito boa tarde. Pedimos a gentileza da atenção de todos para o início da cerimônia de entrega da Medalha Tiradentes, mais alta condecoração concedida pelo Poder Legislativo do Estado do Rio de Janeiro. A Medalha Tiradentes foi criada com a intenção de premiar personalidades que tenham prestado relevantes serviços à sociedade fluminense, dando provas inequívocas de identidade e efetividade para com o Estado. Nesta mesma ocasião, entregaremos também o título de cidadão do Estado do Rio de Janeiro, concedido à personalidade oriunda de outros locais da Federação ou estrangeira que der provas inequívocas de identidade e efetividade para com o Estado do Rio de Janeiro. As duas honrarias serão entregues a Achim Steiner, subsecretário-geral das Nações Unidas. Achim Steiner, cientista, diplomata e ambientalista alemão, nasceu no Brasil e foi educado na Inglaterra. Formou-se em filosofia política e economia pela Universidade de Oxford. Desempenhou vários cargos em ONGs e instâncias internacionais em vários países e atua com destaque a serviço das Nações Unidas. Atualmente, é diretor executivo do Programa das Nações Unidas para o Meio Ambiente e subsecretário-geral das Nações Unidas. Sua atuação, fomentando as iniciativas do Programa das Nações Unidas para o Meio Ambiente, deixou as mais profundas marcas nas políticas nacionais e internacionais. Neste momento, temos a elevada honra de anunciar e convidar para compor a mesa de honra a excelentíssima senhora desembargadora Maria Inês da Penha Gaspar, vice-presidente do Tribunal de Justiça do Estado do Rio de Janeiro. Excelentíssimo senhor ministro Herman Benjamin, do Superior Tribunal de Justiça, que veio do painel anterior e está na mesa também neste painel. O excelentíssimo senhor deputado estadual Jorge Pisciani, presidente da Assembleia Legislativa do Estado do Rio de Janeiro. Excelentíssimo senhor Akin Steiner, subsecretário-geral